A lot of the students by the end, they did not want to destroy their piñatas, because that was part of it. The exhibition was going to be like, okay, we're going to go ham on these piñatas, right? It's going to be like this performance of violence. And it's going to be like, I had all these ideas. But then the students were like, I worked really hard on this. I don't want to destroy it. But then the most beautiful thing that happened was a few students came up to me and said, I don't want to destroy this, and it feels important for me to destroy this in front of everyone.
This is High Tech High Unboxed. I'm Alec Patton, and that was the voice of Paola Capó-García. Paola is a professional learning designer at the High Tech High Graduate School of Education, but before that she taught 12th grade English at High Tech High Media Arts for 12 years. In this episode, we're talking about a project that Paola designed and ran in 2022 called Politics of the Personal. For this project, students wrote an essay and a poem, and, as Paola mentioned, made a piñata. We recorded this interview with a live audience of student teachers as part of the San Diego Teacher Residency. You'll get to hear their questions at the end. And there's one more thing you should know about Paola. She's San Diego's Poet Laureate, so I asked if she could start us off with a poem.
This is more of a thought experiment. It's kind of a first and second draft of a poem, but I've never read it out loud, so I was like, sure, let's do it today.
World premiere, everybody.
This poem is called In the Dream I Keep Having. I'm handed a baby every time. It just appears one day. No birth, no screams or plans or pain. Just a neutral-looking baby in my hands with a desire to survive. Sometimes I'm in an airport. Sometimes I'm in a nice apartment. Sometimes I'm nowhere and everywhere. And I keep putting the baby down to do other things. To find it food or water or a blanket, to give myself a minute, and then I lose the baby and spend the rest of the dream trying to find the misplaced baby. I always find it and I'm never happy. I don't know how to breastfeed. I keep calling my mother for guidance. Sometimes she's there, feeding the baby. Sometimes she's far away, unable to answer the phone. Incapable of mothering, I seek the mother who over-mothered me in the hopes that she has a little bit of mother left inside of her to mother this at times motherless child. Sometimes I hand her the baby and walk away, able to breathe again. Sometimes I come back.
Well, thank you so much. Now, you can choose your metaphor here. What was the seed or the spark for this project?
Absolutely, Diana Benavides, my community partner. She is an incredible local artist. She's from Tijuana originally, based now in San Diego. And I have seen her piñatas everywhere. I've seen them in museums in Mexico. I've seen them in galleries here. I saw her online everywhere. And what she does with the piñata form is really remarkable because she takes this childhood-specific, really familiar object and she politicizes it, right? She makes it specific to her own experiences as an immigrant woman, as a border-dwelling woman. And so a lot of her piñatas have to do with reproductive rights, rape culture. A lot of it also has to do with her identity as someone who's lived on both sides. And I always was so enamored with her piñatas, and I saw it and I thought, it would be really cool if my students could make that.
Do you remember when you saw your first one?
The first time I saw it, someone had posted it on Instagram, and then I knew that she had a few pieces, I think in El Secut in Tijuana, and there were some pieces at the Mingue International Museum as well. But she always felt like this distant creature, this person around me who was making cool things. But then it was kind of remarkable when I found out that she was dating a friend of mine.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, oh, maybe I can contact this person.
Do you remember when you first had the thought of looking at one of her piñatas and thinking, oh, it'd be cool if my students made those?
I mean, the first time probably was a couple of years prior to 2022, but May, June of 2022, that's when I really started to think, okay, what am I going to do next semester? Because I wanted to use the summer to kind of lay the groundwork for the project. And so in May or June, I stumbled on one of her piñatas. I think it was specifically a pink piñata that she kind of slices in the middle, and it says, asking for it. And I remember seeing that and thinking, wow, I think my students would be really impacted by this image. And it also feels like something approachable that they could make. You don't have to have any art background to be able to make this piñata. And so when I saw that, it immediately triggered this other dilemma that I had been having in my classroom, which is how do I make the research essay more enjoyable and approachable to students? And so the idea that she could make these piñatas political, something that she's passionate about, made me think a little bit more about, well, what if then the research essay could be something personal and political for the students, right? A political topic that personally impacts them. So the community partner, Diana's work really is the full inspiration, kind of paired with this dilemma I had been having for so many years in my classroom.
Now, let me ask, the insight that if you bring somebody's personal experience into a research essay, it will be more compelling to work on, that's an insight that would work whether or not anybody makes a piñata. How important do you think the art element of this project was to the overall project?
I think it's really important because it's a different access point. As much as I want for everyone to thrive with the research essay, that doesn't necessarily happen 100% of the time. There might be some students who still by the end can't really get it together and produce the research essay they would want to produce. But they get an opportunity with the piñata to make something really incredible and stunning. They get to celebrate themselves through the piñata in a way that maybe they couldn't fully celebrate themselves with the research essay. And so for me, breaking up the research essay into components, into the thesis statement, the outline, all those things, allows for them to celebrate themselves through different milestones of the essay so that it's not just about the final product, but then the piñata, the remix of that research, ends up being a great opportunity for them to not just assert the argument of their essay, but also practice metaphors and symbolism through the image and be able to use their hands in ways that the research essay didn't give them that opportunity. So it's a really important part, and Diana being the inspiration to it, then it makes it feel that much more important for it to be a big part of the project.
Tell me about reaching out to her.
Instagram is the best resource for everything. That's also how I end up getting in touch with most of my community partners, is just sliding into their DMs in some way, professionally. So as I mentioned, I went into her DMs and I introduced myself and I said, hey, I know your partner. I explained what High Tech High was. She already had knowledge of it. But I just introduced myself, said, this is the project I'm doing. I would love you to be a part of it. Or if you want to talk a little bit more about it, I'm available during these times. Trying to not make it easy for her to say no, right? You don't want to overwhelm them and front load them with a lot of information, but say, this is the idea I'm working with. And I knew that she had worked with kids in the past, not just adults. Also, a lot of universe things happen. Not only was she dating a friend of mine, at that point she was about to start working at the Mingei International Museum, which is where I used to work before I started working at High Tech. And so we had a lot of people in common, and then it made it that much easier to get her to collaborate with the school because now she's a museum employee, and Mingei has worked with our school in the past. The third beautiful universe thing is that the semester I'm going to do this project, the Mingei is about to have a whole piñata exhibition for 3 months. And they're going to showcase piñatas from all over the world and local artists, including Diana's work. And so all of that just started to take shape. She got excited about it. When I told her about the project, that's when she told me, I'm about to work with Mingei. We're going to have this exhibition. This should work beautifully. And she also gave me a list of materials that I would need to start getting to make it cheaper, because that's the other thing. There's a lot of materials going into this. So luckily she already had a checklist and cheap ways for me to procure those objects, like hit up all the grocery stores and grab as much newspaper and coupon clippings as you can, because we're going to use that paper to create the molding for the piñata initially. This is a specific glue that you need. And so all of that happened really early on so that I didn't have to rush and then also use all of my project budget on maybe the most expensive versions of those materials.
Yeah, I've never heard that before, but that's such a good point, that one thing that an expert community partner can do is tell you how to do the thing more cheaply, because they've had to figure that out.
Oh, yeah. Because she has to do it constantly. She does all of these workshops, and so she knows all the tricks of the trade, and she lived nearby, so she told me this grocery store always has this kind stacked, and this type of paper is really good for this. And so she gave me all the tricks of the trade.
Did you make a piñata yourself before you launched?
I had done one with her during a workshop. I always include some sort of art activity in my classes, and while I am someone who loves to go to a museum, loves art, I consider myself someone who is constantly around art. I'm not always the best at making it, but I do think it's really important to participate in the project with your students. And so I didn't make one specifically to a political topic, but I had made a piñata with her in a different workshop.
Yeah.
But in a different way than how my students were going to make it, because there's a way to make it with cardboard, there's a way to make it with balloons and paper mache. There's a lot of different ways to make a piñata.
Okay, so what were they doing?
They were going to blow up a balloon, and then they were going to use lots of newspaper and glue to be able to create like a globe paper mache. And then eventually, once that hardened, 2 days later, they would pop the balloon, and then they would be able to like fold that into different shapes. But a lot of them, it worked out to have the circular foundation because many of them ended up using that as their base, and then they used cardboard or more paper around that base.
Were you nervous going in knowing the students were going to be doing a thing that you hadn't done, or were you feeling confident because you had Diana?
I felt so confident having Diana, and that's my biggest thing is like always have a community partner because I never want to shy away from teaching something just because I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
Right? That's such a disservice to my students. So I'm going to find someone who does know how to do that, and I'm going to learn in the process with the students. I would never want my students to shy away from learning something or doing something because they don't know how to do it. So I have to be able to model that for them as well.
As I understand it, the essential question was, how do our personal experiences connect us politically on a global scale?
Mm-hmm.
How were the piñata and the research essays ways of addressing those questions?
The launch of the project was not like a big flashy launch. We launched by just reflecting on our identities. And so there was a series of sort of bubbles, this graphic that I created that had a middle bubble and then many bubbles around the main bubble. The middle bubble, the students had to list out parts of their identity. I gave them options of, right, we're going to talk about gender, race, ethnicity, nationality, citizenship status, if you're comfortable with that, sexuality, if you're comfortable with that. Those are all things that you can put in the center of the circle. And then from there, the outside bubbles are ways of thinking about your intersecting identities. So what historical moment or what topic could you generate out of that? So I gave them an example of mine. If I'm thinking of myself as a Puerto Rican woman, right, two big parts of my identity, could I do it on the different waves of feminism in Puerto Rico in the 20th century and the 21st century? Could I do it on the high rates of femicide in Puerto Rico? Right? That's a way to do a topic that sort of gets at the intersection of my identities and gets me understanding something outside of myself as well. So I get to learn about myself while also learning about something outside of myself. That combination is very important for me. That made it so that every student is writing a different research essay. That makes it so that they are the experts on that topic. I am not. They're teaching me. I'm helping them write it, but they're actually educating me on that topic. So that also sort of breaks down the hierarchy in the classroom. I think the most important piece, though, for them to understand that is that as they're doing their research, right, they're understanding a little bit more maybe about their family's history. For some students, they're engaging with the history of their ancestors, or they are exploring parts of their sexuality through this essay and trying to come to terms with who they are finally by understanding the Stonewall riots, right, by understanding different parts of LGBTQ history. And so it was a deeply personal experience for each student to, A, come up with the topic, then to research this topic, and then to sort of crystallize this topic, right? To synthesize all these ideas and educate me on that topic while they're learning how to put it together in a sort of coherent or cohesive way. And so the piñata for me was the last piece because I think when you're using your whole body, the materiality, everything, you really then get to assert what you mean by the essay. The essay is the literal explanation of your argument. The piñata ends up being the metaphorical explanation of your argument.
Rough percentage, like how many kids were like stoked? Were there kids who were totally resistant? Were there kids who were kind of wait and see? What was the vibe you were getting?
I actually got a lot of buy-in pretty quickly. And the students who had a hard time filling out those bubbles, it's because it's hard to talk about yourself.
Yeah.
At that age, at 17 years old, when you're still trying to figure out who you are, to be asked to just fill out a perfect bubble with all of your identity markers was a really hard thing, which is why we gave them the full 2 hours, right? We put music on. We made it just a general reflection time, and I would check in with all the students. There were some students who just couldn't fill it out. They didn't know themselves. They couldn't see themselves that clearly yet. And so then it became a great opportunity to maybe bring in one of their best friends to be like, hey, how would you describe your friend? Right? Because sometimes other people see you a little bit more clearly than you do.
Yeah.
And then we could chime in and say, what I notice about you is this. What about this? You love this. And so then it also became a really beautiful bonding activity between students, between me and some of the students. And so I felt a lot of openness that day with the launch. A lot of students, I think, appreciated that I wasn't going to tell them what to write their research essay on, or that their research essay wasn't just going to be like them choosing a historical moment they thought was interesting, but that it's actually something that they're implicated in. When I think back on the 5 years I spent at High Tech High Media Arts, that's my best batch of research essays. That's the batch where students were really proud about their thesis statements, about all the research that they had. And so I feel really good about it, and I think I got the most buy-in out of that one because of that personal connection. Students were allowed to use first person only in the intro or conclusion, right? Body paragraphs, you couldn't use I. But they were allowed to maybe bring in a little bit more creative writing into the intro and the conclusion to be able to directly connect themselves or their families to the topic. And it made for some really emotional essays. When it came time to the piñatas, that was a party, right? Like they got so excited to make those. I can only think of one student who flat out told me, I don't like art. And so we had to support him quite a bit because he just didn't care about the art component, but he really cared about the research essay. And so it really depends on the student, but overall, this is the most buy-in I ever felt out of any of my projects.
And when did they start making piñatas? I think there was a workshop that happened.
We started in September, done by October with the research essay. We kind of took a break from it because I think students sometimes need breaks from projects, right? They might get a little tired of their topic, and we might need to do other things. And so in those middle moments when we were done with the essay, we were doing a whole poetry unit. We were reading and writing poems. And so they were exploring literary devices, doing all those things. But then it felt like I needed to relaunch the project, and it coincided really nicely with the week before Thanksgiving, which we all know is a dead week anyway. We're not going to get kids doing very much the week before Thanksgiving, and with the Mingue exhibition of piñatas. And so then Diana and I planned it so that we would relaunch the project by taking them to Balboa Park to see this exhibition so they could start to think about the piñatas and like how ambitious they can be. Meet Diana there, and she would like walk them through the exhibition and through her own pieces. And then the next day, this was a Wednesday, she came to the main commons of High Tech High Media Arts, and I gathered all 50 students in the main commons, and she did a presentation on herself and why she does what she does. And then we just, the rest of the day, just made piñatas together, put some music on, and it was just really enjoyable. And then it was Thursday and Friday, so students who needed to continue working on their piñatas could, or other students could do makeup work. And then other students who wanted to take their piñatas home during Thanksgiving break could, because exhibition wasn't until December. And so we were able to really be done with all of our products well before exhibition.
So did they make their entire piñatas over like 3 days?
Some of them made it in a day.
Wow.
Right? It depends on the size of it and depends on how clear of an idea they had going into it. Some students during the workshop changed their mind completely about what they wanted to do and then kind of played around with the materials, and it took them longer. So it took students anywhere from 1 day to a couple of weeks. The piñatas that you see downstairs that are really, really large and have a lot of details, those take weeks, right? Because students took them home, or they actually needed help. They needed other people helping them, maneuver the big piñata and be able to put more glue on it. I had to procure more materials after that because we ran out of glue so quickly. So that took longer.
And so I was imagining that workshop was kind of like what you did, like just like a sort of skills, like just make a piñata and then we'll figure out what you're really going to do. But it seems like they came into that workshop for the most part with a clear idea of how they were going to effectively express their research topic via the medium of piñata. How did you prep them for that?
I prepped them by having a design sheet, and I had them start pitching ideas for their piñata beforehand. Before we went to the museum exhibition, they had to come up already with a design. And then at the exhibition, I asked them, now that you've seen all these piñatas, can you redesign your piñata? Do you want to? If you don't, great. If you do, take the time now to think about other ways to make your piñata. And so there was a sort of pre-design process and a post-design process stemming from the exhibition. And then while they're actually working with the materials, sometimes your piñata takes on a life of its own, or someone next to you gives you a way better idea for it. And so the collaborative piece there was a really big part in how some students ended up designing their piñata, because there was a lot of collective problem solving with some of the piñatas.
And was it just that one day that Deanna came in?
The day before at the exhibition, and then the one-day workshop, but it was an all-day workshop.
But then when all the big technical problems presented themselves, she was already gone, because it would be the kids who really were like, oh, I'm really stuck here. That would happen on the Thursday or the Friday. So what did you do then?
I would text her. I would call her. We would Zoom her, FaceTime her, and just be like, hey, what about this? What about this? I would also just push students to go online and watch YouTube tutorials and just get creative with it. We had a lot of artistic kids in the class, and so a lot of them would have creative ways of solving the problem for them before I needed to even call Deanna. But every once in a while, I would call her and be like, okay, so I have these 3 dilemmas. What do you think?
I also just want to draw out that museum trips with students can be disappointing. Like you could think, I don't want these kids to start designing their piñatas because they haven't seen enough piñatas and they aren't ready to do it. But actually doing that initial design means that they have much more discerning eyes coming into the exhibit. So I think if you can have that kind of pre-work, you get often a much richer experience.
Oh, definitely. I mean, to see what contemporary piñata makers are making today, like they saw a life-size lowrider piñata at the Mingue, right? They didn't think that would be possible, but then they also saw micro butterfly piñatas hanging from the ceiling. And so their core memory of a piñata is the classic round piñata with spikes, right, that you hit.
Yeah.
And so if we can sort of subvert the shape of it and make you see it in a different way, I think that was huge for students. But I think it's important to guide them through that reflection instead of just saying notice things, actually having that graphic organizer, doing the pre-work and the post-work.
When you think about the ones where you really went, oh, that was really cool, what springs to mind?
I had a student, Farnell, she's Filipino. Her mother is a nurse. And she was always struck by this kind of, the large statistic of Filipino nurses in the United States. How did that come to be, that we have such a large number of Filipino nurses? Well, there's a whole history of American nursing programs in the Philippines, right? There are specific cities that have really high Filipino populations because of these nursing programs, because they were brought in specifically for this. And so Farnell was really passionate about learning about this because of her mother's experience. And then going deeper into that, the ways in which Filipino nurses were disproportionately affected by COVID. And so her intro is so beautiful because she opens it with, the sound of the door closing as her mom is coming back from, an 18-hour shift, and then goes into those statistics. And then ultimately her claim about the ways in which Filipino frontline workers were used during COVID-19. And so then for her piñata, she made a globe that was decorated with the Filipino flag, and then it had a little nurse's hat on top. And a lot of the students, by the end, they did not want to destroy their piñatas, because that was part of it. The exhibition was going to be like, okay, we're going to go ham on these piñatas, right? It's going to be like this performance of violence. And it's going to be like, I had all these ideas. But then the students were like, I worked really hard on this. I don't want to destroy it. But then the most beautiful thing that happened was a few students came up to me and said, I don't want to destroy this, and it feels important for me to destroy this in front of everyone. Specifically that one, the student said, I need to destroy it because I need it to represent the ways in which Filipino nurses were impacted by COVID, right? The strike, the blow on it represents that. Another student writing about Roe v. Wade and the erosion of women's reproductive rights, she made a uterus. She's like, I have to destroy this uterus in front of everyone. I have to make that political statement. And so some students really came through saying, I know I've spent hours and days on this, but part of the performance requires me to destroy this. And so those are the ones I really think about, the students who had really clear ideas, not just on the argument of their research essay, but then how to embody that at exhibition and how to represent that through performance.
Rob Reardon has the phrase transformation of content, which I taught at High Tech High for 3 years before I understood what it meant. But the point, as I understand it, is that a lot of learning happens through taking information and transforming it and transmuting it into something else. And it's that process of figuring, well, how do I represent this in this other way is where a lot of really rich learning happens. And so I think that okay, how do I take this concept that I've been writing about in this very logical way and transmute that into, not just transmute that into a physical object, but then for these students into a performance grounded in that physical object. It's so rich. There's so much, apart from the emotional soul impact of just hearing that described, just the cognitive work of figuring that out is so rich and so deep. Which brings us to, tell me more about exhibition. Where did it happen? What happened other than a lot of piñatas getting wrecked?
So at Media Arts, first semester, we always did an all-school exhibition. They're seniors, and so we get first dibs on the main commons, which is, a large space. We hung up most of the piñatas from the ceiling. Some of them we hung up on the walls, and some were pretty fragile, and so we put them all across tables with black tablecloths just all around. The lights were really low. Some of the students made graphics for the title, Politics of the Personal, and we had that projected on different parts of the wall. And then when it came time, Diana Benavides came to our exhibition, and we also had a host. One of our students, Layla, really wanted to be the host. And so they hosted the whole event, brought in the audience, and then introduced a few of the students who decided to smash their piñatas. And so the students were able to come up with the microphone, explain their research topic, and explain why it was that they were destroying their piñata in front of everyone. And so when they smashed it, they also then invited other audience members to come in and keep smashing it. And the big part of it is that we stuffed all of these with candy, and a lot of them were stuffed with the students' own poetry. And so the idea was that as the candy and the poem slips came kind of falling down, that a person would pick it up and sort of read the poem. And so we were able to do that for 5 or 6 students. And the kids were going crazy just on the ground grabbing all the candy. So it also felt like a really nice community event. And the students were really proud to get up there and talk about, nervous, but proud to talk about their research.
And that the poetry writing happened in between the research essay and the piñata, is that right?
Yes. I really wanted to combine research essay and poetry in the project. And I wanted them to eventually write a poem about their topic and have that be the poetry that's inside the piñatas. We ran out of time, right? We didn't have enough time to fit in that poem. Mm-hmm. And so instead it was just other sort of personal poems that the students had written, and those were stuffed inside. If I were to do this again, I would make the research topic poem a really big part of the project.
So exhibition ends, there's wrecked piñatas and bits of candy under the tables and bits of poetry. You clean up, and then how did you reflect on it with students?
So I did it with my individual groups. I didn't bring all 50 of them together. I did it separately. And we talked the next day. We just sat together in a circle, and we talked about how they think that went, because a lot of that exhibition, they came up with it, right? I had a specific idea, and then they said, well, what if we do this instead? And they were the ones who really curated it around the room.
What were the big things they changed from your idea?
How they were hanging and where they were hanging was a big one, and also that not every piñata got wrecked, right? Only a few, and then that they came up and spoke into the mic and talked about each piñata. I was thinking more of like an artsier exhibition and like a little bit more abstract, and they're like, no, we have to talk about our research. Like, it has to make sense. Because I'm sure, as a humanities teacher and anyone in this room, like just posting a research essay on a wall doesn't always have the curatorial impact that you want it to have. And it's very important to celebrate that research. Yeah. Like the students many of them were proud of those essays, and they were like, no, we need to showcase them. Or there were other projects that semester that had nothing to do with the piñatas that they wanted to showcase. So we came up with a greatest hits table. And so we called it that. We had a table that was called, greatest hits, and students were able to put their other favorite activity or product that they made that semester on that table.
I love that. Yeah, if you take nothing else away from this, do that in your project. Even if you're like, I hate piñatas, I don't want to have anything to do with piñatas, you should do that. That's awesome. All right, I think it's time to open it up.
Hello, my name is Omar. I'm working with the 11th grade right now. You mentioned that you had a student that didn't like the art component of the project, so not doing the piñata. You also mentioned that there was additional support. What did you have them do instead of the piñata? How do you support students that don't want to do a certain part of the project?
Great question. So that student, I was supported by the inclusion specialist for the grade during that moment because she really sat with him and just had those hard conversations of like, hey, you know, you're about to be 18. You're going to have to do things you don't love sometimes. For me, the most important piece is not putting so much value on the piñata that it would destroy someone's grade. Mm-hmm. You know, ultimately, I really want to emphasize the research essay, their participation in other components of the class. So the piñata was actually valued quite low. And so the students were intrinsically motivated to make the piñata, not extrinsically motivated because of the grade. But that student in particular, you know, I had the inclusion specialist, she and I sort of sat with him and really talked to him about this and tried to figure out, okay, what is a way that you could translate this and make sense to you? Well, his whole essay, and he did write the poem because he liked writing poetry. He liked writing in general. It was just visual art really rubbed him the wrong way. And so we were like, okay, well, yours doesn't have to have all the frills. You don't have to have all this color. Can we make something that looks like you? And so he ended up making a TV because his research essay was about media. And so, you know, he just made a black box. And that was it. That was enough for him. And that was enough for me because I do think that he put in a lot of effort in the other parts of the project, and at least we had valuable conversations with him, and he ended up doing it. And so maybe if I placed more emphasis on that piñata, he wouldn't have gotten an A on it, but I don't really want to put so much value on the skill of art, more about their disposition and the completion of it, and then I want to emphasize the skill of writing more versus art because it is an English class.
One of the really critical things about any teaching, but I think it's most stark in PBL, is that kids will often be like, well, I don't really want to do that. I want to do this other thing. And one of the things that I think is really important to figure out is like, what are the non-negotiable core skills that if a student doesn't learn this, I am failing them as their teacher? And what are the things that are like, kind of cool, but they don't really need to happen. Like, for example, if everybody's writing a science fiction story and a kid is just going, man, I have no interest in science fiction, you have to ask yourself, like, am I going to feel like I have failed as a teacher if every kid doesn't understand science fiction? You know, in some contexts, maybe the answer is yes. But in other contexts, you might say, no, there's some really core skills about writing that it's really important that I impart to them, but it doesn't have to be in a science fiction story.
And that's a great point. And there are some moments where I've been like, sure, let's tailor this project a little bit more to you. This didn't feel like a moment to do that because he was the only person in the whole group, right? Like really the point is to have these piñatas together. But also a big part of his personal growth was being a little bit more on board with things and also collaborating with others. And so for me, those felt like really important skills and competencies to develop for him. And doing the piñata, really following through with that instead of abandoning it, felt like a specific growth for him.
Did he smash it?
He did not smash it, no. He didn't want to be in front of people.
That's fair, yeah.
Anything, so I will respect his privacy.
I'll smash it in private, but I'm not going to.
Very brilliant student in so many ways, just visual art really is just not his forte.
Yeah. Who's coming up next?
I'm Stacy. I'm teaching 9th grade physics. My question for you is, you, like a lot of people that I've talked to, mentioned finding a community partner. Both, it was somebody that, you know, you were interested in working with, but also somebody that you had a personal connection to and like an in. And I feel like a lot of people always say that, but like, what if you're new to this? You don't maybe have a lot of networking connection within the specific area that you need partners.
You need to tell your friends to date more widely.
Get everyone on Tinder. No, this is the only time where second time that a community partner lined up like that for me where I knew them. Every other time they've been strangers to me, right? And I just cold called them or cold wrote them and said and introduced myself. I really lead with the fact that we are a Title I school. I lead with like how creative we are as a school and what we do. The philosophy of the school I think is something that really inspires a lot of people. And so I lead with that when I'm doing my cold calls or my cold emails or cold DMs. And then I think the most important thing is to be out and about in the city, especially if you're new to the city, right? It's just going to museums, right? Really checking out, going online at least, and seeing what are the upcoming exhibitions for next year. Ooh, maybe I can design a project around that. Or this year there was the World Design Capital here in San Diego and in Tijuana. Ooh, could I do something around that, like investigating that? Obviously, right when we have election season, we design around that. So I think there's a way to plan ahead by going on the websites of different like local institutions, arts institutions, and seeing what they have in the pipeline to see if you could design something around that. And just starting to make contacts, just sort of, especially with museums, like we get heavy discounts to go check out museums. For transportation, we get discounts. And so starting to really have your contacts in different places, I think you have to be really, really proactive with it, and also bleeds into your personal life. Like PBL really is a lifestyle, right? Like all of my project ideas come to me out in the wild during my personal time. Like, ooh, that would be cool to do with students, right? Like at the San Diego Zine Fest, ooh, yeah, I absolutely want to get my students to have a table at the Zine Fest, so we're going to make zines, right? And so out in the world, being exposed to the cool things that San Diego has to offer, I find a lot of ideas that way, and then I just go and I be brave and I introduce myself to that person, really leading with what High Tech High is and who it serves.
Awesome, thank you.
Come on up.
Hello. So I'm currently placed with sixth grade humanities. And so this has been an age-old question, and I'm curious what your approach is as far as how do we display student writing at exhibition in a very authentic way. So I think I'm curious specifically for this project, the research paper was such an important and integral part of it. How did you display that equally, or how important was that to you? Did you do it differently in years past? Things like that.
Yeah, great question. This is something that I think us humanities teachers are always talking to each other about. You never want to shortchange the writing, and you don't want to just turn it into a visual object. You want to be able to have both, right? For this project, the students had the essays on the table because they demanded it. I was not going to do that. But the artist statement for each piñata had aspects of their research essays in it, right? It had their thesis statement at the top, and then it had a description of how the piñata connects to their research. So that's a way to kind of like break it down in a more accessible way for the viewer. In the past with poetry, I've done everything from projection, having lines of their poems all around the room. And while they were doing that, the students performed. The students who felt brave enough, every student performed. We did this performance. My director really didn't like this performance. I really liked it. It was my second semester teaching. And I had in mind that all of the students, all 50 students, would be reading their individual poems at the exact same time. So all you heard was noise, and they're walking around the room. And then I would ring a bell, and it would stop, and then one student would come forward in the silence and read their poem by themselves. And then the cacophony would start again, and we were moving around, and their text was projected all around the walls and on them, right, on their bodies as they were walking through.
That rules. That rules. I'm so into it.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
And also you got all students performing because they were performing in a way that made them feel comfortable, because not every student had to read their poem by themselves, but they could be drowned out by the noise of other students. And so they all showcased their poem during that time, but maybe in a more experimental way. That was one way to do it. Other times I've done what are called poetry broadsides. And for this one, we went to the Athenaeum Art Center, which is in the Bread and Salt building in Logan. They are a printmaking studio, letterpress. They have really old machines. They're absolutely incredible, and they collaborate a lot with our schools. So you could do workshops there. What we did is that we brought a printout of their poem, and then the students did block printing stamps, and then they created the design around their poem on this 11 by 17 paper, and then we displayed those on the wall. We did this exhibition at Corazón del Barrio in Logan, and so these were sort of decorated poetry prints, right, with their own art and their own poems, and we talked about the long history of poetry broadsides and what they've meant for poetry throughout the years. So that's a way to showcase it. And then other times I've showcased their thesis statements only, right? Because at the very least, you can get the core idea of the essay, and every student ends up being really proud of their thesis statement. They might not end up loving the whole essay, right? They get lost in the weeds sometimes of their 6-page MLA research essay, but the thesis statement, we work on that so hard that most of them feel really proud of it, and we can showcase that. So those are a couple of the ways that I've gotten around just having the research essay on a wall and people sifting through it, but just maybe, getting creative with how we show it.
Thank you.
All right, we have about 1 minute. I'll hold space if anybody wants to. Who wants to?
Hi, I have been really inspired by your passion and the authenticity that you brought to this project. So my question is, if you're an educator and you find yourself working on a project that doesn't feel authentic to you and that you're not passionate about, what advice do you have for us to get the students to buy into it when we're not like 100% on board?
And there's not an option to not teach that? Like you are obligated to teach it?
Like in elementary school, there are a lot of people on the team, right? You're like a team of 3. And there's compromise. You can't all do something you're passionate about 100% of the time. And as educators, I feel like a lot of the time we're doing curriculums maybe that we're not super passionate about. But projects feel like a special time where you can kind of go crazy with it and make it feel really special and authentic. But in the situation that it isn't to you, but maybe other teammates, what advice do you have, like, for making it the best experience for your students?
This is where I'm like really argumentative with people. I'm just like, no, but I have to love it to teach it, right? Like I want my students to love it, therefore it has to be contagious, right? You have to feel it in your body and get excited talking about it. And so, fine, if you have to do the full project and you're not fully on board, right, are there parts of the product that you can take a little bit more control of so that there's a bit more differentiation with your students compared to the 2 other teams? But I think that's a really hard one, right? Because, and I've had to teach things I'm not passionate about. When I taught college, constantly had to teach things that just I had to do because it wasn't my class. It was the main professor's class, and I was one of the instructors. And so I had my own section, and I had to teach what they taught. Really, every single time what I would do is that I would try to find a way in ways that felt relevant to me. And so if it's a specific book I'm not interested in or an author from a long time ago, what are some contemporary connections that I can make? What are some videos that I can bring in to make this more palatable? What are more modern conversations I can have around this? And so that is where I do a lot of research and I try to figure out, okay, how can I connect this to something I am interested in? Because I agree, there's only so much faking we can do, and the kids can read right through that. And so if you can find moments of veering away and pivoting a little, really seizing those opportunities.
I think also give yourself permission, and I mean, talk to your director if you need to sort of get permission, to say, I'm not going to do that bit in my class. Like that just is not, that doesn't excite me. I'm going to do this other thing. Then maybe you go, boy, that sounds like a lot of work. Actually, doing the same thing as everybody else is sounding better and better. I'll just do that. Or you think like, ooh, if I don't do the same thing, the kids are actually kind of stoked about this thing, and I'm gonna find it hard to be the one standing alone when the kids are like, why aren't we doing this thing that everyone else is doing? So it may be that once you give yourself permission, you actually think, no, I'd rather do the thing that everybody else is doing. But I think allowing yourself that is really important.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, I have one final question for you. When you cast your mind back on this, what is a moment from the whole project that has stayed with you?
There are a few, because there are a lot of tears. Like students really connecting deeply to the research and connecting really deeply to their personal histories, right, in the essay. There is a really beautiful one that's hanging downstairs that it's probably the most simple one. It's a book. This student chose to write about Ayotzinapa, which if you don't know about Ayotzinapa, those were 43 educators in Mexico who disappeared. And the Mexican government played a hand in it. They were on their way to a protest, and they were never seen ever again, and their bodies have never been recovered. And so there is a really beautiful slogan as part of the movement. The parents started this movement, and it says, "Vivos se los llevaron y vivos los queremos." They took them alive, we want them back alive. And so the student, completely on his own, was so moved by the story that he made a really simple but highly impactful piñata. It's just a yellow book, and it says "Vivo se lo llevaron, vivo los queremos" in the front, and on the back there are individual photos of all 43 teachers. And I love that I get to look at that piñata every day outside my office. I love that student felt compelled to honor those teachers. Yeah, it's a really beautiful thing that I think about a lot.
Paola Capó-García, thank you so much. This has been an absolute delight. Everyone, give her a big round of applause.
Thank you all.
High Tech High Unboxed is hosted by me, Alec Patton, with editing by Yesenia Moreno. Our theme music is by Brother Herschel. Huge thanks to Paola Capó-García and the residents of the San Diego Teacher Residency for this conversation. You can find photos of the piñatas as well as the note catchers Paola made for this project in the show notes. Thanks for listening.